So here's my information. I'm the Director of Arts Education and Accessibility. I'm the State Accessibility Officer for the National Endowment for the Arts and work with several other federal organizations doing accessibility work. Our focus is working with underserved in Louisiana, including the aging population, veterans, people who are incarcerated, and several others independent of what we're doing through the arts. Next slide, please. So as part of Louisiana Division of the Arts, one thing I thought museums might find useful is we provide grants to arts and nonprofit organizations. We do grants that include general operating support for arts organizations. We also do Louisiana project grants and museums would be able to apply for that. We do those grants through our 9 regional arts councils. And the project grants are as they sound. They're for specific projects where you're doing an art project within your organization. We also do artist grants, and the artist grants are for musicians, for visual artists. We have 9 disciplines for artists. And we work closely with a lot of funders. Next slide, Sarah. As I said, we work with a lot of funders. We work with the National Endowment for the Arts. We work with the Kennedy Center. We work with the National Assembly of State Arts Agencies. And for creative aging, we are working with Arrowhaw Philanthropies and Lifetime Arts. These 6 are the kind of leaders in the arts field for creative aging that have been working in this space at least for the last 10 to 12 years. And create a lot of the research that I'll be sharing today. Next slide. A lot of people look at the creative aging space and say that the seniors are toward the end of their lives. The quality of life may not be what they were once they were young. Research is showing that its ability is on a spectrum. Ableism is a new term that's coming in creative aging now. Of no matter where you are, you're able to do something, and kind of the projects or programs will be to fit your ability as opposed to you having to fit their ability. As you can see, the toddler goes through life all the way through to a senior, and the arts is one of the few possibilities that they can experience all the way through their life in some form or fashion. So thus we're saying it's a very human variable ability. Go ahead, Sarah. Aging research, as many of you may already know, over 11,000 people a day are turning 65 years of age. By 2035, there will be more 60-year-olds than there will be 18-year-olds. 2 in 5 Americans will be over 65. By 2030, 60-year-olds will hold over 24 trillion in assets. The debt ceiling right now is 28 trillion. So as you can see, that's a pretty good bit of funding or wealth that they will have. By 2030, over 30% of the workforce will be eligible to retire. And the fastest retiring sector will be state and local government workers, followed closely by federal government workers. So as you can see from these statistics here, there will be a need for these individuals to engage in something. If they're retiring 60 range, life expectancy is to 85. So they'll have 25 years of possibilities of things to do in their lives, travel, engage in things they enjoy, or enjoy their life. Next, sir. Oh, missed one. Oh, okay, keep going. So how can we slow aging down? The national research shows by integrating arts into the aging process is one of the best ways. In some cases will rival medicine when it comes to dementia, when it comes to Parkinson's, when it comes to a lot of the things that seniors will be facing. And this is also for movement and dance and a lot of neurocognitive impairments and things like that. So the research shows that you may not be able to stop aging, but you could at least help control it and at least be comfortable in the space that you're in as you age and to go through that continuum. Next slide, Sarah. So arts and aging, as I was mentioning, movement and dance is very good for the neurocognitive, also to help release the chemicals in the brain to help people better understand what's going on, be more present, do those type things. Poetry, a lot of seniors are doing poetry now across the country, Poetry for Life. There's research that shows that if you read a poem between the ages of 13 and 25, even if you have dementia or Alzheimer's, there's a good possibility you may remember that poem the rest of your life and be able to repeat it. That's also true with music. In London, in England, there's a lot of studies that between 18 and 25, that if you had certain music you liked during that period of time, even if you're in a state where you don't understand what's going on around you, you don't recognize people, you don't recognize family members, if you hear the music, you can remember the lyrics, you can move, you can do these type things. So there's a lot of resonance with arts in helping people no matter what state, what condition they're in at any part in their life. Drawing and coloring is also another popular thing now to help recapture parts of the brain that may not be being used or may be limited in function, to where this will help get the person more present and get them into what they're doing. Also, picking colors, recognizing shapes and things like that is very similar to what a toddler would do, but also as a senior, you're able to integrate this into how you process information. And music and songwriting, I think that we'll all agree that music is probably one of the best ways to stimulate an individual to either a positive or negative, however the feeling or the mood is, those type things. The right brain, left brain, as Sarah, I think, will cover a little bit in her part of the presentation. There is a lot of information going back and forth now about memory and loss and things like that, and a lot of programs that are being done specifically with music because of how it affects the brain and the neurons and things like that. So it's a fascinating area that's going to be moving forward and continuing in the next 5 to 10 years. Next slide, Sarah. For me, what we're doing with creative aging in Louisiana specifically is we got a grant from Aroha Philanthropies and Lifetime Arts is going to be our service provider. We are one of 23 states that received a grant across the country. And the model that we're going to use, being that we are a rural state, as many of you know, and we don't have a mechanism to deliver to the whole state. We have a lot of basically Shreveport, New Orleans, a lot of large cities, and then we have a lot of smaller areas. So we figured that a teaching artist roster might be the best route to go for Louisiana after we've done some surveys and some research. So we'll be creating a teaching artist roster of around 20 to 25 teaching artists in all areas of the state. The reason that we chose this method is because we like to have a teaching artist within an hour or two of any area in the state to cut down on costs, cut down on travel, and to also have that availability for organizations such as museums, nonprofit arts organizations, and that type of space for those if there's a teaching artist for creative aging that you'd like to bring in. The regional arts councils, we have 9. You can find those on our website, or you could just Google your local regional arts council. We'll be working with them, through each of them, to solicit teaching artists, and then we'll be training them. They'll go through 8 hours of training through Lifetime Arts, specifically with the neuro and a lot of the other movement and things like that. That we specialized on how to sequential learning and a lot of the other things, take it a step further and than other just doing an art project with a senior, but how to help them better communicate, be more in tune with what's going on in their lives. Also for the caregivers, there'll be some caregiver help too for a lot of the seniors, to incorporate them into a lot of the programs that are going on. And we'll also have intergenerational programs where we bring seniors together with their grandchildren or kids in the communities to try to work on passing on traditions or passing on things that the seniors that maybe we may be losing with our seniors as they're moving on in life, to where the kids aren't picking up a lot of newer things. We're also working with a lot of councils on aging to do this work too, and this has been helpful to us to have space, and they're very excited to have some programming beyond what they offer now. And as I mentioned, a lot of the arts nonprofit organizations will be able to take care of this, which includes museums. Next slide, Sarah. Aging in the U.S., as I mentioned, the need for quality program for seniors will explode in the next 10 to 15 years. There'll be multiple seniors in many houses. They'll have a lot of time on their hands. They'll have some means. As a museum person or a museum worker or a museum director, this may be something for you to consider for maybe creating a senior board or a volunteer activities for seniors, or any type of thing that you may need help with for positions you may not be able to pay. The seniors are very volunteer driven, so they're looking for opportunities and to do those types of things. As I mentioned, multi-generational learning for families. A lot of the research shows that if a family can go out, including the senior, as well as a senior to all the way down to the toddler, the mother, the father, that there's a lot greater likelihood that they will go and they will enjoy the experience and go back again. So if you have more to offer for the whole family, even if the senior is just maybe perhaps in a gallery sitting, watching, doing something that may not have to be an active engagement, but they are more likely to be entertained and engaged. A lot of museums are doing senior mornings, senior afternoons, where they'll bring seniors in, walk around, or have coffee or things like that for them to do in a relaxed pace, as opposed to having the whole museum open, just having a senior time for them to kind of do something at their pace or their leisure. Activity-based opportunities, Sarah will cover some of those, but those are a huge explosion right now, especially in libraries and museums across the state. And they're seeing this nationally up on the East Coast. There's a lot of museums that are providing a lot of research right now for universities in this space. Community integration, we are trying to integrate the communities in. We know that a lot of seniors live in rural areas, and so we're trying to integrate communities through the councils on aging, arts councils, arts nonprofits, libraries, trying to find places to host these events and to bring this work into those communities. And as I lead up to this, museums and libraries are the number 1 and 2 primed organizations for growth in this silver tsunami of seniors who are retiring. So if nothing else, you don't remember anything else, I hope you remember that you are part of the expanding market, and you have the opportunity to partake in this as it is the largest growing segment. And that's the nickname that has been dubbed the silver tsunami. As more baby boomers are retiring, you kind of get the idea. So that's pretty much it for me. I'd like to thank everyone from LAMcon for inviting me. I'd like to turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you, Danny, and for painting this, demonstrating the scene on the state scale of what you're working on, and also the incredible need, I think, and interest among this audience of older adults. My hope is to share a little bit more about what's happening at one museum and some of the lessons learned that I think the programming that's happening at our museum and others is really easily adaptable and meaningful at a variety of institutions. So my name is Sarah Lowenburg. I am the manager of education for the Louisiana State Museum, specifically in New Orleans, working with our 5 locations in New Orleans, including the Presbytere, the Cabildo, and the New Orleans Jazz Museum. In 2018, we were awarded the Seeding Vitality Arts and Museums Grant from Araha Philanthropies, which Danny mentioned. And in partnership with AAM and Lifetime Arts, Araha offered 2-year grants to museums across the country to begin offering art making courses for adults ages 55 and above. Since then, we have offered classes in a variety of disciplines and formats, though each has been rooted in Louisiana history and culture, connected to the museum mission, and highlighted the work of local creators and culture bearers, as well as helped build community within the class and the city at large. Each class has been taught by a professional teaching artist, and it offers meaningful skill building through sequential learning and concludes with a culminating celebration, an exhibition, or other professional or public way of celebrating the students' work. The image on this slide is of our drum class when they did an off-site visit to Congo Square. So in spring 2019, we launched the series with an 8-week printmaking class at the Cabildo, a National Historic Landmark that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, located on Jackson Square in New Orleans. And the site, which was built in the 1790s under Spanish rule, now hosts a variety of exhibitions highlighting the state's history and art, and consequently served as the perfect springboard for students' creations. So for example, students use the exhibition We Love You New Orleans, a celebration of the city's food, architecture, amusements, nightlife, and more as an inspiration for their own linoleum block prints, which were then displayed in a neighboring gallery at the culmination of the class. So these students found personal connections in the museum exhibitions, such as memories growing up in New Orleans or favorite forms of architecture, and wove those connections into their own art, which created this beautiful and diverse tableau of prints celebrating the city. On the top left in this slide, you can see students sketching in the gallery, while the other two images showcase students creating their block prints. And if you look closely, on the top left image, a student sketching in the background was sketching a tablecloth from the Roosevelt Hotel. And then right below that, you can see that she has transformed that design into a print. So it's cool to see how that inspired further art. Building upon the success of the printmaking class, the following courses continue to prioritize connections to museum content and highlighted New Orleans traditions. We also deepened those connections to local community and tradition by working with local culture bearers as teaching artists. So for the second series, the museum offered a drumming class in conjunction with Drumsville, Evolution of the New Orleans Beat, which is currently on display at the New Orleans Jazz Museum at the Old US Mint. Throughout this 9-week class, the students explored the rich influences of New Orleans music, including African rhythms such as funga and bambula, Caribbean rhythms, and the New Orleans second line beat. In week 7, the class met off-site in Congo Square, as you saw on the title slide. The teaching artist, Luther Gray, who is sitting in the center of this image, facing, kind of looking to his right, is the co-founder of the Congo Square Preservation Society, and he leads drumming in Congo Square every Sunday, continuing a centuries-long tradition. Luther wove storytelling and history into each new lesson, creating a communal space for students to share their own stories and build meaningful connections with the art form and its community. Many of these students have continued drumming after the class and even have attended the Sunday drum circles in Congo Square. The third series in winter 2019-2020 was a beading course in the style of Black masking Indians, also known as Mardi Gras Indians, which was taught by Big Chief Daryl Montana of the Yellow Pocahontas Black masking tribe. Chief Montana is a 4th-generation Black masking Indian who's been masking for nearly 50 years, and he's the son of Allison, also known as Tootie Montana. Throughout the 8-week course, students learn the techniques and artistry behind the craft, hand sewing their own designs out of beads, sequins, and pearls. They explored the differences between the pictorial 2-dimensional uptown style and the 3-dimensional downtown style, and used those as inspiration for their own canvases. Similarly to Luther Gray, Chief Montana infused storytelling and song into each class, bringing the culture and history to life, and building a shared appreciation among students. Each class, for example, started and ended with the whole class singing Indian Rat, a song that is integral to the tradition. And here are 3 different images of students hard at work on their canvases. The bottom right, you can see Chief Montana standing over and offering instruction. We were very lucky that that class ended in February 2020, because of course, when COVID-19 hit in March 2020, the following month, it drastically reshaped the museum's offerings, including these courses for older adults. Although students could no longer meet in person, the museum was able to shift relatively quickly to virtual courses through continued funding and guidance from Aroha Philanthropies and Lifetime Arts. So the online courses began in summer 2020 with 2 4-week-long poetry classes, which met entirely over Zoom. Even in this virtual setting, the courses follow the same guiding principles of being grounded in the museum content, exploring Louisiana culture and history, and providing a space for community and growth. For example, the teaching artist, Elizabeth Gross, who's a local poet, designed the course around poets with connections to Louisiana. Students read works exploring local history and environmental issues and created their own works, many of which reflected those local connections and personal stories. The virtual courses continued with an 8-week drawing class, again rooted in Louisiana landscape, focusing on New Orleans architecture and students' own homes. The class learned basic techniques using various drawing tools and practice with historic photos from the museum's collection. So on this slide on the left, you can see students discussing each other's work in an early class where they were tasked with drawing an image from the museum's collection. And on the right, teaching artist Jonathan Meyer was afterwards breaking down the perspective on the image using a document camera. So we had an extra camera with actually just his phone, so that students could see him work in addition to seeing his face. For their final pieces, students created drawings of their own homes or neighborhoods. So in the midst of the pandemic, what came out of it was this opportunity for students to reflect on their own sense of place. And as a collective, they created kind of this tableau that spoke to this unique moment of staying in place and being within the city in the midst of the pandemic. Each of these classes, regardless of art form and format, has served a diverse group of students, building connections and community among New Orleanians who may not have otherwise crossed paths. To recruit students, the museum reached out to the docent programs at museums across the city, local community centers, senior centers, and even Mardi Gras crews. Throughout the classes, students found new opportunities to connect with each other and to the museum, and many have returned for more than one series, eager to try out new art forms. Lee, who was one of the participants in all 3 in-person classes, remarked to me in an email, and I wrote it here: "The Cabildo, the Mint, and Congo Square, landmarks I've known my whole life, have never felt so alive and vibrant. I now see, feel, and appreciate them with much greater depth." And I did not pay her to say that. These connections to local history and culture reach far beyond the physical spaces, though. Through these courses, the museum was able to connect students to some of the vibrant cultural communities of New Orleans. Just as many students have continued drumming, others have continued creating beadwork and maintained connections to one another and to the teaching artist. Chief Montana even invited one student, Mr. Raymond, a 92-year-old lifelong New Orleanian, to mask with the tribe for Mardi Gras. Though these plans were postponed due to COVID-19, they have stayed in touch and they are planning for 2022. In fact, Mr. Raymond returned to the beading class once again this year, and the final session of that class is actually tomorrow, so it's still in action. And in addition to making their own pieces, students are also beading butterflies for Mr. Raymond's suit. So their work will be out on the street on Mardi Gras Day, which is, I think, a beautiful sign of mutual respect and appreciation and a way to celebrate the class. On the right here, you can see Mr. Raymond working on a butterfly along with another student. And on the left are some of the students from the printmaking class at the exhibit opening at the end of that course. So these courses, I think it's fair to say, have been overwhelmingly successful, as evidenced by surveys and evaluation, repeat attendance, and sustained community amongst the teaching artists and students. Just to share, I think, a few of our keys to success that I've seen develop over the years. The first thing I would say is hire teaching artists rooted in the cultural community. Their expertise and passion will inspire more meaningful experiences for students and help them connect with pre-existing communities, cultural traditions, and heritage outside the museum. In this sense, the museum becomes an excellent conduit for continued connection. And I think also building on that, hiring teaching artists with experience, which is something Danny touched upon, developing this roster of people to turn to is especially important. Next, I would say weave in connections to the museum's collections and exhibitions. There's a reason that the classes are taking place at the museum. Each course included a visit, whether virtual or in person, to the museum's exhibitions or collections, where the teaching artist shared inspiration, highlighted artistry, and encouraged closer looking. As a result, each class was meaningfully connected to the museum and the wider landscape, and the students created work that reflected that sense of place. And can also conduct thoughtful outreach to develop diverse student groups. So by reaching out to organizations outside the Louisiana State Museum's typical network, I think we successfully cultivated classes of students with diverse skill levels, interests, and backgrounds, and their diversity of experience has greatly enriched these courses. And finally, when going with the virtual option, which I think will continue to be part of our lives in some capacity or another, there are a few basic steps to help support student success. For example, we offered an office hour before the first class for each student to log on and meet the teaching artist and test out their connection. So that way students who weren't comfortable with Zoom beforehand knew what to expect. And the issues were mostly addressed, like tech issues are mostly addressed without it taking away from class time. Though of course that still happens, it's just part of the process. We also offered one-on-one sessions with the teaching artist partway through each virtual class. So during in-person classes, students naturally get one-on-one instruction in downtime or times where there's not active instruction, and build those connections with the teaching artist, but we had to build it in much more intentionally in the virtual setting. And many students called this out specifically in their post-program surveys as something they really appreciated. So in conclusion, I just wanted to share what's next. We moved back in person this summer and are completing our second in-person beading course this week. It got interrupted by Ida. It was supposed to end on September 1st, but we're back on track. We did have to make adjustments along the way as the COVID situation changed, but students have been really flexible and really appreciative and grateful to be there. The second drumming class actually is going to begin in just a couple weeks. Registration for that opened today, and will be posted on our social media very soon. So although the grant cycle ends at the end of this year, these courses have become really central parts of our educational programming, and we are excited to continue them well into the future through other sources of funding, through the new payment structures, and other things. I'm happy to help provide inspiration or brainstorming to anyone seeking out ways to start these classes. There's, I think, a lot of ways to fund and support them that don't just rely on a specific grant. And with that, I'll conclude and open it up to questions, and I think stop sharing my screen. Did that work? Yes.
That was great, you guys. I actually have questions. I've heard about these programs through Sarah, through our curatorial meetings, but I don't get a lot of chances to ask questions during those meetings. So how did the online classes do versus your in-person for attendance?
We actually had a strong amount of interest for both. With all of our classes, we do limit numbers to generally about 25 people registered, and anticipating drop off. No matter how excited people are, you know, life happens, no matter how committed they are in the beginning. So we always get 2 to 3 people who drop off. So really planning for 20 to 22 people in a class. And that happened with drawing. Our 2 poetry classes, which were really an attempt to pilot this online, were both smaller, which was also intentional and part of why we did 2 shorter sessions, because discussion was such a central part of that course. And we had between 7 and 10 people in each of those classes. So the numbers have been actually pretty similar. I think part of that also is that during 2020, people were so eager to find opportunities to take courses that people who may not normally be comfortable with online were ready to take that leap. I do think our audiences varied slightly because we have been able to reach people in our in-person courses who don't even have emails and are not interested in setting up emails. And we weren't quite as successful reaching them virtually, although we work with PACE, the Catholic Charities Program, to bring people to our in-person classes, and they were able to get a couple of people set up for online. So the audiences were slightly different, but we also reached people who lived slightly further away and weren't ready to come to the museum because we are in the middle of Jackson Square and it's not easy. So there were pros and cons to both. Yeah.
Lauren's asking in the chart if there was a charge for any of the classes.
There's no charge for any of our classes. I do know some of the other museums that are in this cohort through our House Philanthropies have charged either small, like generally kind of small amounts as a way of getting buy-in, and or offer them on a sliding scale, which is something that we've considered moving into the future as a way to kind of offset costs, but we have not ever charged.
And what times were the classes? Were they Saturday afternoons, Tuesday evenings?
They're generally actually during the middle of the day. Our beading class is 9:30 to 12:30 on Wednesday mornings. Drumming is also on Wednesday mornings. I think mornings are often easier, especially to come to the French Quarter. But because we're working with adults who are mostly of retirement age,
Right.
that's worked out. We have had some folks who are not yet retired, but who set their own schedules and they're able to work around it.
Okay. Let's see. And you said that I think it was actually Danny that you reached out to community centers, nursing homes. Was that one of the ones, or senior living?
Correct.
To really try to get your audience, and not just rely. You didn't just rely on advertising in the Advocate or something. You really kind of had to reach out to those communities.
We found it's very targeted with the seniors because they're a little, I won't say less trusting, but they're in their own, very comfortable in their own space. So we've been very careful to try to reach out to them where they are, or through family members, caregivers, things like that. One question Beth had asked is if you want to be a teaching artist, please reach out to me. We will be looking for teaching artists and we will be paying them in each of the regions. They will be required to go through the training, obviously, that we'll be doing, but my email is D as in Danny, B as in boy, E as in elephant, LANGER @crt.la.gov.
And Tim is asking, does the funding for the art supplies come from the partnerships with the arts councils that you mentioned?
Well, what we're doing is we'll be paying, since it's a pilot program, we'll be paying for supplies and we'll be paying for the time of the artists. What we're hoping that as this continues, we're trying to get some buy-in from the councils on aging and some of the other areas by saying we'll provide the teaching artist costs, which is usually $50 to $100 an hour, if they'll cover the materials.
Okay.
So we're trying to get a partnership built.
And I'm sorry, I think I missed, but you said the artists were, like one of them was a Mardi Gras chief, and he just had to go through a training, I guess, to kind of learn how to teach what he was doing. Is that how it works?
So we don't provide specific training in that sense, but we have received support from the Lifetime Arts staff, and they provide like templates for curriculum. So we work together to ensure that the courses are following the basic principles of sequential learning and such. I think also we made the conscious decision to work with people who are also culture bearers and may not be instructors in the same traditional sense, and that's also been really successful. So just thinking about consciously which route you're going in that sense, but overall ensuring you're hiring someone with experience teaching, which was still very much the case with all of our teaching artists. And I think something that the roster that Danny is developing will be a huge asset in supporting.
And so y'all just pretty much supply them with an outline about this is how the class is taught.
Sure.
Yeah,
sure.
so we provide them with that curriculum template and then meet with the teaching artists in advance several times to go over planning it together.
Tim has a question, and I think Sarah and I could help a little bit with this. We did a veteran songwriting project for the state of Louisiana. We did 4 last year, a year and a half ago. And we were able to do that, did a pilot. We did 4. The veterans are another group that is underserved in our communities. We're the 5th largest per capita state of veterans in the United States. So Tim, it's a great point. And the veterans are very similar to seniors. We found that they're a little hesitant to join or to get involved. But once they do, they're very excited. And it's very important to have a veteran lead the programming, we found. We've had some success, and you can reach out to me, Tim, and I could kind of share some of it. I actually met Sarah at the lead conference several years ago, and Sarah can tell what she was doing with the Intrepid.
Yeah, I formerly worked at the Intrepid Sea, Air, and Space Museum in New York, which is also a ship and museum. It's a retired aircraft. It's an aircraft carrier. And I helped oversee our veterans initiative, developing military family programs, after hours events for current and former service members, and others. And I'm happy to chat with others about that and provide any insight I can, because I would love to see that continue to grow here, and I would love to be a part of that.
So Janae, you'd asked the question, what we're hoping to do with Lifetime Arts is to train 18 to 20 teaching artists across the state in the Lifetime Arts method. What Sarah did was very intentional in New Orleans because of the New Orleans culture fairs and that type. What we're hoping to do is have a myriad of different things for different activities, movement, dance, music, poetry. So we're trying to bring different artists in. And the reason that we're hoping to train them is because once they're trained, they'll have a leg up to get other opportunities to work, to be paid. And also this will help certify a lot of the organizations that we're working with for Arrowha philanthropy funding and other types of national funding. So we're just trying to grow the popularity and the people in the state, actually, that type of situation.
Thank you. All right, does anyone else have any questions? All right, well, Sarah and Danny, thank you very much. This was very informative, and Sarah, I might be reaching out to you with questions, but it was highly enjoyable, and we thank you again. There is going to be a survey we're going to send out after all the programs. Take a few minutes to fill it out online first. That would be great. We are hoping, I'm planning on it to be in person again next year at Monroe for LAM. So, but this was our first foray into online, and it went great. And a lot of it had to do with the speaker. So I want to thank you again, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.